Hi there, I'm Frater IAC, and several people have suggested to me that it might be a good idea since, I've gone through all the steps on initiation into Hermetics, and I'm off to the races with Key to the True Kabbalah and practice of magical evocation, that maybe I should take the trouble to make some videos about the various steps in initiation into Hermetics. And I thought that's a good idea because there's a lot of teachers out there and everybody has their own voice and they've talked about how to make it through step one and step two and step three and so on. Let's just add my voice to the mix because the truth is there are a bunch of teachers, and through the course of your ascent, you're going to encounter and learn from a number of people. Not to mention the fact we have Perseus Arcane Academy, which is an excellent platform for us to get together and compare notes and share best practices, and maybe even work together from time to time. And we've got the Facebook pages. There's a lot of stuff going on that we have that people didn't have 50 or 60 years ago. Okay, so we're in great shape, but it still takes work. And that's why this first video is going to run a little bit long because there's some groundwork we have to lay in place, prior to actually doing the thought control exercise. And I'm actually going to walk through that with you and tell you how I did it. And we're going to do it together. But before we do that, There's some there's a couple of things here that Bardon did not tell you, all right? And it's important for you to understand these things. So, what are we looking at here? Well, look at this diagram with the crown above it. That is so cool. You got Keter, Chokmah, Binah, Chesed, Gebura, Tiferet. This is the Kabbalah. This is the tree of life. And Bardon was a Kabbalist, very much so. And in fact, Muni Sadhu, Valentin Tomberg, these are Kabbalists. Stylianus Ateshlis was a Christian Kabbalist, and the Kabbalah is a wonderful diagram it's a cosmology that really makes sense. So we're here on Malkuth, on this earth, and Malkuth is more than that, but for our purposes here, it's this earth where we are, where we live. Okay, and look at what's going on. So you walk up here to 9, which is this purple one. This is Yesod, and Yesod is the realm of the moon. It's called the plane of formation, and the bottom line is you have to have attained Yesod as a state of being in order to do magic in any kind of meaningful, repeatable way. And I didn't make that rule. That's just how it is. So you've got to realize that. So this Hebrew letter here is called Tau. That's the name of the letter. And what you're doing with Initiation into Hermetics, the entire volume, okay, Initiation into Hermetics, is this one path, this little path that leads you from Malkuth to Yesod, plane of formation. That's what this is, and that's what we're doing. And this is one of the most, well, it is the most valuable journey that any human being can take. The late Ron Clark, in an interview I heard him do, he said, "This is our birthright. This is what every human being needs to know how to do." And that made sense to me, but it's hard. And so most human beings don't know how to do it because they're uninitiated. And the thing about this initiatory path is it's going to take work. It's a sustained effort over a period of time that yields results that are great beyond your imagining. This is the greatest path I could ever imagine, and I am so grateful that it came before me. It's the best thing I've ever done in my life. And I hope that for you as well, because the objective is to transcend, to become a God man or a God woman. That's what we're trying to do here. We're gaining control of ourself and these elemental forces within us so they don't control us, and we awaken our higher self to control them. That hence my magical name, Frater IAC, Imperat Animus Corpori. Imperat Animus Corpori translates from the Latin to mean spirit rules body. Okay? And so it's really important to understand that this entire volume is the basic initiation to get you to the point where you can learn how to do powerful and repeatable magical acts. And that's important to know. So now look at the card here. I love the tarot. I read the tarot often. I always do divinations with the tarot, if you've looked at my talisman video. So this is the Rider-Waite deck. Pamela Coleman Smith created these pictures, and I like her art, so I generally use this deck to do my tarot readings. But look at what's going on in this card. You've got this woman, and she is floating in the spirit realm, the Akasha. Why is she floating in the spirit realm? Because she's taken the trouble and made the sustained effort over time to tame the elemental forces within herself so that she controls them and they do not control her. And so look at what's going on in the card. She's got two wands. The first wand represents her will, and the second wand represents the will of God, and you cannot tell the two apart. It's the same thing. Because again, she has tamed these forces within herself, so now she can look at them as faces of God, and she can actually wield those elemental powers and the Akasha to do purposeful magical works. She's a magus. She is an initiate. She is a full-fledged hermetic initiate because she has tamed these elemental forces. So she's able to see the lion, for example, is omnipotence. And omnipotence is the God face of fire, and it's also the inner pillar of volition. And it might be a good idea if you're just starting out on this. I totally recommend you should read the entire book, Initiation into Hermetics, through from cover to cover at least once as when you're doing this, because there are things in there that help you the entire way. Um, so anyway, you're on the path of Tao. Now, here's what Bardon actually says in terms of the big picture, because the way I'm geared, I need to understand what the big picture is, what the goal is, what I'm trying to accomplish before I can really do much of anything. I can't be compartmentalized. I can't say, oh, my duty is to do this. I always have to know what it's leading to. And so here's what Bardon says about what it's leading to. The concept of God serves the average man or woman. In Harry Potter, they're called muggles. Isn't that fun? But the concept of God serves the average man or woman as a support or as a point of reference. So your spirit can be free of uncertainty and not get lost, because it's easy to get lost. It's easy to get lost in distractions, in emotions, anger, the desire for revenge, victimhood, having self-pity parties. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can get lost. But you have now set foot on this path of magic, the path of Hermetic initiation. So you are a magus. Well, everything that you do from now on is leading to that goal. And so the magician knows God in all God's aspects. Okay, so when you read step three, the first few paragraphs in step three, Bardon talks about the four pillars in the Temple of Solomon. Those are your four pillars in your inner temple. And as you master the elements, you build each of those pillars. Because the first pillar is the pillar of silence, which corresponds to earth. Then you have the pillar of knowledge, which corresponds to air, the pillar of volition, which corresponds to fire, and the pillar of courage, which corresponds to water. Okay, so you're going to know God in all of God's aspects because initiation into Hermetics is about mastering the elemental forces within yourself and then learning how to wield them externally to yourself. In other words, to be a God man or a God woman. That's what we're doing and why we're here. However, Bardon points out in the second paragraph, because these are his words, there is a service element to this. There is it's a sort of shamanic thing, maybe a pastoral thing, where, I consider myself a guardian of the heart, a guardian of the moral compass. And, from a place of unity with the divine mind, I try and perform good and loving service to the life and collective soul of the people. That's who I am. And that's what I do with my magic and with my life. So and the other thing that I need to tell you, when you finish, this is a transformative journey. You're starting off now. And for whatever reason you got into this, I want to do magic. Okay? But when you emerge from the other side of this, you are going to be a completely transformed person. You're not even going to be close to the same person you were going in. You're going to be an order of magnitude better and more powerful. And the power that you're going to be given as you go through these steps and master them to the point where you can move on, you're going to be given untold power. Okay? And the problem is, to whom much is given, much is expected. So what I have found, just speaking for myself, if you're an uninitiated person, you can get away with doing some bad stuff and not experiencing immediate karmic consequences. Once you get to a certain point in initiation into Hermetics and you do something that is misguided, the consequences are going to be powerful and they're going to be immediate. Okay, and I didn't make those rules. That's just how it is. That's what I have experienced. So this is a lifelong path, and it will transform you. So anyway, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. By the way, Bardon mentions God about, I think it's 96 times in Initiation into Hermetics. So God is a big part of this because we're aiming for what the Orthodox Christians call theosis. You could call it nirvana, whatever it is, where you're one with the divine mind, one with the source. That's what you're shooting for. And so what does Bardon say about magical abilities or occult abilities? They're mere side effects. Oh, does that make you feel uncomfortable? When I read it, it made me feel uncomfortable because I wanted to get into this to do magic. Well, yeah, but imagine a dirt road. There's two tracks in the dirt road. There's a quality track, which is your spiritual development. That's your quality, your mystical quality as a human being. Okay. And then there's a parallel track, which is the quantity path, and that's the power of your magic. There is a direct correlation between your spiritual quality and the power of your magic. As you move closer to oneness with God, or however you conceive of God, okay, you move closer to that state of unity, your magic becomes more and more and more powerful. It's amazing. But you got to work both tracks at one time. Okay, so that's the deal, which is why Bardon says it's designated for noble purposes only and aids to your fellow man. That's why they are reserved only for the true magician. He dismisses those who only address the magical path without addressing the mystical spiritual quality path as mere sorcerers. And there are people who are quite powerful who do not serve the light. And in the end, though, the light is always more powerful than the darkness because life on this plane is transitory. We're guests here, sojourners, and we're here to learn this. So don't forget that, or at least so say I. But anyway, let's talk. Most I have this titled "Awakening the Observer," and look at this young woman here. She is like most human beings. She is living in this prison where she's controlled by every little feeling and every little thought. Ugh, she's afraid, she doubts, she worries, she dreads. It's a nightmare for her, you know, and that's how most people live their entire life. Don't be one of those people, okay? The very first exercise into in initiation into hermetics, step one, is called thought control. And it took me a while to figure out what I was actually doing here. Because it's not really about controlling the thoughts. It's about controlling your higher self in relation to the thoughts. Hold that thought. Pardon the pun. But who is this observer? You're awakening the observer. You're going to wake it up. Who is it? Do you know? Hold that thought because I'll tell you in the next slide. Okay. The observer is your higher self. All right. So I know you know this because you've gotten on this path, and undoubtedly you've read a lot of stuff about spirituality. Every human has several bodies, and Bardon concerns us with the material body, the astral body, which is your emotions, your feelings, your character, and then the mental body, which is your thoughts, and then there's a causal body beyond that, which is the Akashic body. That's how I think of it, at least. And this is your immortal spirit. This is where your spirit rises to attain that oneness, that unity state with divine providence. Okay, so and I love this picture. Look at this brain. It's flexing its muscles. In fact, it has big bulging biceps. Oh, wow. The wrong. This is the wrong approach to this exercise. Yeah, and it's the wrong approach to many of these exercises. Will becomes very, very powerful in magic, but right now you're learning how to disengage, awaken your higher self, your observer, and let that observer be a passively aware entity that observes your thoughts. That's what you're doing here. So there's no flexing of, brain muscles. We're not doing that. Consider these vehicles here on the bottom of the slide. We got two of them here. We got a little convertible. Looks sporty. Nice little sports car. And then we have a bus. And this is one of those tour buses. And if you've ever been in a tour bus, man, some of them have just these beautiful, huge picture windows. And you can sit in comfort in the bus and you can just look as the vistas of scenery unfold in front of you. It's just beautiful. And think about a mountain road, okay? So you're driving a sports car on a mountain road. Are you paying attention to the view? No, no, no. If you're if you're not going to run off the road and take that long drive off the cliff, you're paying attention to where you are and what you're doing. You're anticipating the turns. You're giving it gas along the straightaways. You're taking the turns. You're driving. You're in control, right? Wrong. That is the wrong approach for this exercise. There are other exercises where you definitely want to take control, not this one. Here, you're in that tour bus. You're sitting in a nice, comfortable chair, and you're looking through the window at the vista of your thoughts marching by. You're observing them without engaging them. Okay? So don't do the wrong thing. You don't have to strain your will to do this. You're going to chill. You're going to step back. You're going to be passive. You're going to observe. So what are you controlling? Well, Bardon says, and it's always a good idea to read and reread his instructions, because first of all, he wrote in German or Czech, and that was translated from the Czech probably into German, and then it was translated from German into English, and so it may not be quite what he meant. The meaning you take from it in English may not be quite the meaning that he was trying to impart when he wrote it in Czech. You see? So read and reread, because there's going to be a lot of stuff between the lines that you need to pay attention to. So here we go. You're going to seat yourself comfortably in a chair or lie down on a sofa or bed. I'm going to stop us for a minute and say, don't be lying down on a sofa or bed, uh, because you may fall asleep. And falling asleep isn't going to hurt you during this exercise. But in later exercises, in the later steps, there are some exercises where you most definitely do not want to fall asleep. So let's get out of that habit right now. So what I'm going to suggest is the same thing that Tanya Robinson wrote about with the asana posture in on her Falcon Books publishing blog. You're going to sit in a straight back chair. You're going to have your palms on your knees. You're going to have your back straight, your neck straight, your feet flat on the ground. That is called the throne posture. And in later steps, you're going to learn how to hold that posture for as long as you want. And you're going to create a body memory to where the minute you assume the asana posture, your body relaxes and calms and begins producing endorphins, because it knows that there's something good and pleasurable that's going to happen. The asana posture is your friend. So anyway, you're going to lie down, or you're not going to lie down, you're going to seat yourself comfortably. Then you're going to relax. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to step back and observe your train of thought for 5 minutes. And you're going to do your best to remember these thoughts. Now, in the beginning, you're going to have what a lot of people call monkey mind. Okay. You're going to be thinking about, oh my God, I got a project that's due Monday at work. I've got to think about that. I haven't even started. No. You're doing thought control right now. You do not want to engage with that thought. Okay. You don't want to think about the power bill. You don't want to need to think about rent. You don't want to think about anything, the fight you had with your significant other, whatever. Okay. You're doing this. Okay. So what you're going to do, those thoughts are still going to come. There's still going to be a happy little parade moving across your mind. The trick is, though, you're now disengaged with them. You have awakened your observer. You've had it step back so that it's just watching those thoughts cross your mind. Isn't that great? And see, look at the last sentence in this paragraph because this is the key. Your position to this flow of thoughts should be that of a silent observer, completely free and independent. Free and independent of what? Of the thoughts. You're not engaging the thoughts, you're observing them. Okay? So that's what Bardon says. Now, let's look at common mistake number two, engaging the gears. Um, we had the car analogy already. So, you know, you're not engaging the gear, okay? You're awakening the observer, your higher self, and you're stepping back and relaxing. It's going to be a passive awareness. Don't engage the gears. Don't engage with these thoughts. When a thought goes by, don't engage with it. Just don't, watch it. Just observe it. And you know what? It'll disappear because that's what thoughts do if you don't engage with them. Then the other thing that I recommend, common mistake number three, is not keeping a journal. Keep a journal. It's really good. And the way I did it, or the way I would do it now if I was doing it over again, I started doing it this way in later steps. I would keep a journal for each step. So I would say, okay, step one, spirit, thought control, mindfulness, focus, meditation, vacancy of mind. That's this journal. And then you're going to have a journal for your soul mirror and your work on that. And we're gonna be talking about those, and I'm going to show you some really, really excellent techniques for getting back into inner balance. But keep the journal; it's good practice. And the other thing that's useful about a journal is you can look stuff up in it, because if you remember something and you don't quite remember it, but you want to remember it completely, reread your journal because each entry should have the date, the time you did it, how long it took, physical, feeling, and thought sensations, and just any other notes. That's how to do it. So now, let's try it. I'm going to walk you through this. And we have this little fella sitting in the office chair, and he's pensive. He's got his hand up to his chin, and he's got his legs crossed. Okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to sit in our chair in the throne asana posture, back straight, neck straight, hands palm down on knees, feet flat on the floor. Okay, and we're going to sit in the asana posture, and we're going to close our eyes and relax, clear our mind, and simply observe the thoughts from a position of just simple awareness. You're just being aware of them as they march across the sky. And the sky analogy is something I got from a movie called The Outlaw Josie Wales. It was a Clint Eastwood movie made in the 1970s. And in it, Clint's love interest says, thoughts are like clouds floating across a clear blue sky of your mind. And I was so moved by that. That's how I applied myself in this exercise, and that's how I became successful with it. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this kind of with a narration, and then we're going to do it together in silence for some time. So here we go. Sit in your chair, assume the asana posture, close your eyes, and relax. All you're going to do is observe. You're disengaging your awareness and just observing the thoughts as they float by. Oh, there's a cloud. It's about work. I watch it. I watch it float across the sky and it dissipates. Oh, here's another cloud. I'm getting ready for a date this Friday. What should I do? Don't engage with that. Just let that thought float right across your awareness. Thoughts about work, thoughts about romance, thoughts about the day to day, all those thoughts. Just let them float across. Don't engage with them. Don't try to control them because you won't. You're not trying to control the thoughts. All you're doing is observing them as they arise. Okay, now let's take a little bit of time and practice this in silence. We'll do it together. Close your eyes, clear your mind, wake up the observer, begin. Okay, wasn't that fun? I think I gave you about 45 seconds. So that's good. But remember, Bardon, the instructions on this particular exercise have you do it each day until you get to the point where you can do it steadily for 10 minutes. And I want to mention a couple of things here that are really, really important. Okay, first of all, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let me explain. There are people in this discipline. Um, One of the main reasons I have seen people fail in this discipline is because they try to be perfect. They try to master each exercise to the point where it's just perfect and it can't possibly be any better. Don't do that. There's a couple of reasons not to do that. The first reason is you won't make any progress, okay? Because Bardon tells you, do this exercise until you can do it for 10 minutes and then move on. Don't keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it with the hopes that you'll get better and better and better. Practice it to proficiency and then move on. The second reason for doing it that way is that these things are organic. They're like seeds. Every time you do one of these exercises, you're planting a seed, and that seed will grow. Even after you have gotten proficient and moved on, that seed is still growing within you. And the next time you use that skill, you're going to be better at it automatically because that's how it works. But you have to master the skill to proficiency and then move on. And when you're doing this, um, do like the Zen archers, in Japan, you know, don't worry about the result. Practice the exercise as perfectly as you can possibly practice it. Do the exercise perfectly without expecting anything. Don't even think about the result. Because if you're doing the exercise over and over and over every day as perfectly as possible, nothing can stop the result from occurring. Nothing can stop that manifestation. It's going to take the time that it takes. So don't worry about the result. Don't lust after the result. Lust after doing the exercise as perfectly as possible regularly. You're going to do it every day. Every day you need to be practicing this. And, at this point in my own ascent, um, Gosh, I mean, I practice magic, I 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day, and I mean, every act almost is a magical act. And so your life becomes magic. But when you're first starting out, you know, set aside a half an hour. Because if you can't make that time, you're not going to make it through this. You have to make the time for that sustained effort day after day after day. Do it as perfectly as you can. It's going to work. Okay, enough of that. And there's one other thing that I do want to mention here, and that is in the first paragraphs of step 3, where Bardon talks about the 4 pillars of the inner temple. And obviously you have and they correspond to the elements. So you have the pillar of silence, which corresponds to earth, volition, fire, knowledge, air, courage, water. Okay. And those are faces of God, by the way. So one of the reasons you're learning how to control this stuff within yourself is so that you can see those faces of God, perceive them, and begin to utilize that in your own magic. So how do you use this? How are you going to use thought control? Well, as you can see, I don't have a pillar, I have a well. This is the well of silence, because this is how I envision that pillar. Because Bardon presents it as a pillar, I think of it as a well. Because I'm a scientist, and a lot of times I'm going to be engaged in some research, and I'm not sure what approach to take, in terms of my deliverable. And so what I do in that case is I ask the question in the form of a prayer to the divine mind, to God. And I drop that question down the well, because the well is a portal. And the well, once you control those earthy things within yourself, you have this nice well, and you can drop a question down there, and what bubbles up is insight, inspiration, intuition. And yeah, you still have to do your due diligence, because everything that bubbles up from there may not serve. And you have to train yourself to do this. But this is how I use thought control. And I've long since finished Initiation into Hermetics, but I use a lot of these exercises every day. So anyway, a well of silence. So I tap my inner well of silence for divine inspiration. That's it. And so this ends this video, and I know this went a little long. My intent is to have these run about 15, 20 minutes, but I needed to give you the background at the beginning of this one so that you'd understand what you're actually doing here, because I think that's really important. So anyway, uh, I wish you the very best on this path. If you're just starting out, welcome. There are plenty of people around. If you are run into trouble, if you're having problems, whatever, ask. People will help you. Farewell until the next video.